Hi, I'm John Morris Russell, conductor of the Cincinnati Pops Orchestra, or as I'm known around town as the Pops Guy. I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, a product of the public schools. I attended Ludlow Elementary School, and in fourth grade, Mrs. Blakely came into the classroom like she did with every classroom for years and years and went up to each kid and said, "And what instrument will you play?" And if you didn't have the instrument, she'd find one for you. And we had a full school orchestra there in elementary school. The very first piece I ever played was third trumpet on The Saints Go Marching In. It was fantastic. I can still remember, that third trumpet part. It was awesome. And throughout all of my school time, I played music in all types of ensembles. When I got to high school, it was jazz band and marching band and school orchestra and concert band and pep band and the spring musical, and it was all music all the time. The band room is kind of where we lived. And at the same time, our family was real big music lovers, and so living in Cleveland, we'd go to the Cleveland Orchestra quite often as well. It was a fantastic experience. And if that wasn't enough, in high school, we had a garage band called Seabreeze. Thank you, Keith McCann, for coming up with that fantastic title for our band. Anyway, but we played the music of Earth, Wind and Fire in Chicago, Parliament, Funkadelic. I mean, we were funky and fantastic. It was so much fun to be able to do that. There were really no walls between musical styles. Growing up, it was just like, if it sounds good, it is good. And we jumped into every type of musical genre with absolute joy. So Seabreeze had two sets. We had our 1950s set, and then we had our funky contemporary set. And the 50s set, 50s tunes are like super, super easy to learn because so many of the tunes are based on blues chord progressions, and so you can pick them up very easily. So we had all these Hawaiian shirts, and we would play the first set, and we would do like school dances, and we did some outdoor concerts in some shopping areas that were trying to increase foot traffic. Man, we were the bomb of Shaker Heights there in the late 1970s. And then for the second half, we would don crushed velvet tuxes. The rhythm section all had green, and all of us there in the brass section, we all had purple, and they had the really big, wide lapels and the crinkly stuff on the shirt, and the big, fat bow ties, and the platform shoes. We had all sorts of dance moves doing it, all the rest. But I tell you what, there is nothing like the feeling of playing in a band, and people are dancing to your music. They're literally catching your groove, and it's a fantastic feeling. I started with trumpet lessons, then also took piano lessons at the same time. The great thing about living in Cleveland is you get to study with some really incredible musicians. I started with Charlie Couch, who was a second trumpet player with the Cleveland Orchestra for many, many years. And then also a very influential teacher was Mr. Trzynski, Joe Trzynski, who was like a local session player. I mean, he was playing, all the shows. He'd play the circus. He would do all the recording gigs. And so, I had this, perpetually had these kind of two styles of music kind of being taught to me. All the classical stuff with Charlie Couch and, more the jazz commercial sound with Mr. Trzynski. And it was Mr. Trzynski who gave me that first copy of the Lonely Bull with the Tijuana Brass. And man, I wore that album out. I just absolutely, loved the music of Herb Alpert, and he was my big musical hero. And just got to see him just a few weeks ago there at the Taft Theater. Spectacular. It was always music, you know. I mean, when we were kids growing up, it was just like, this is just what I wanted to do. I didn't know if it was going to be a career path or not. And of course, going to Cleveland Orchestra concerts all the time as well. The cool thing about Cleveland Orchestra is they have these student rush tickets. And either the student rush tickets are like way, way, way up in the nosebleed section, or like the first row. And so I would always get those tickets to the first row. And I'd be sitting there looking up to whoever the guest conductor was. And there was this concert of Stravinsky that Colin Davis was conducting. And I was just like, this is what I want to do. I mean, I also had the experience just when I was 9 years old, went to see the Cleveland Orchestra with George Zell conducting. And this is back in the day when, I mean, George Zell Cleveland Orchestra, I mean, one of the great musical legacies out there. And went to see the Dvorak Symphony No. 8, and there's this trumpet fanfare at the very, very beginning of the fourth movement. It was like, this is what I want to do. And that's fantastic. I attended Williams College in Williamstown, Massachusetts for my undergraduate degree. And it was getting into my freshman year. I was just a music major, right? It wasn't a performance major, but you know, performance was part of it, a liberal arts degree. So it was music history, music theory, some performing. But I started having some chop problems for playing trumpet. And it wasn't soon after, beginning of my freshman year, I went to see a doctor who said, no more trumpet playing for you. You had some physical problems that you just couldn't fix. And so I had to determine, you know, like, wow, you know, what else can I do? And especially in taking music theory and music history and learning so many, you know, great symphonic works there in college, you know, I thought, well, maybe I should give conducting a try. The thing is that as a trumpet player, I would lead brass ensembles all the time in high school and certainly in college. And the trick to starting off a brass ensemble is you breathe. You just, and everyone in the brass ensemble breathes right along with you, and off you go. And I found that, you know, one of the first hurdle that you have to pass when becoming a conductor is to start everyone off. And for myself, it was a really easy thing to do. And so kind of used that just really early experience of kind of working with brass ensembles of my colleagues, and then really wanted to learn about, well, how can we lead a much larger orchestra? So my junior year, I was able to spend abroad at King's College London. And that's when I first took my very first conducting lessons at the Guildhall School of Music in London, and with Harry Newstone, who was my teacher there, who taught me some of the real basic things about conducting, and I led some of my first orchestral ensembles there in my junior year in London. And London is just an extraordinary place to be because there are 5 resident orchestras in the city of London, and like every orchestra that's on tour from around the world is going to play London. I mean, people are orchestral music crazy in London. It's an extraordinary city, and so literally on any given night, you know, you could see 1, 2, 3, 4 concerts going on. I mean, Monday through Sunday. I mean, it's just incredible. And King's College London was right across the Thames River from Royal Festival Hall. And so I got to know Sid, the doorman at Royal Festival Hall. So we'd be able to sneak into rehearsals all the time. And whatever piece of music we might be studying at King's College or at the Guildhall School, dimes and donuts, within like a week or so, we'd be able to hear that piece being rehearsed or hear it being performed live. And so to get in there and to listen to those rehearsals and performances and soak it all in was an extraordinary experience. So I had my conducting debut was with the King's College Gilbert and Sullivan Society. And every year, the King's College Gilbert and Sullivan Society would present one of the Gilbert and Sullivan operettas. And when I was there, it was Pirates of Penzance, and I signed up and was given the opportunity to lead the orchestra for Pirates of Penzance. And of course, we auditioned all the students for the orchestra, which was kind of a mishmash of a band, whomever we could get. We had a piano and bass and a cello and a clarinet and a trumpet, a guy on drum set who could cover a lot of other things. And then the cast was all made up of students, and all very, very fine. But the role of Frederick, the big tenor lead, was this guy, very handsome, lovely voice, and he knew it. But he wasn't really, he was a little bit lazy. So we'd go rehearsal after rehearsal after rehearsal. He'd come in, and he was never quite off script, and he would oftentimes, we'd have to feed him lines, had to do a lot of remedial work to get him to learn all the music and have it all put together. But he was always playing catch up, and come the dress rehearsal, he is just cramming to learn all of this stuff here at the last minute. And of course, you're the tenor, you've got to do all the singing, and he's cramming and trying to learn all of this stuff in such a short amount of time, he starts to lose his voice. And then we're walking into opening night, and someone had suggested to him that perhaps that if he had some brandy, it might actually help the vocal cords so that he would have a great performance. So we walked into opening night, and our lead, Frederick, was he was hoarse, he was losing his voice, he didn't know his lines, and he was drunk. And so, he literally stumbled through Act 1. Come Act 2, his voice had completely gone. So one of the cast members who knew all of his music would stand behind him and sing his lines while he would just kind of gesture like he was singing it. It was like Milli Vanilli or something. And then halfway through the second act, something happened and all the lights went out. So I'm conducting away, and the orchestra, which kind of knows its music, is and then it just starts to as everyone's memory starts to fade, and so the only thing to keep the thing going was I start singing the orchestra part. They keep on, the chorus keeps on singing, we keep on going, the lights come back on, and the whole thing comes back up together, and we get through the whole thing. And at the end of it, it's just like, oh man, I don't know if I have the heart for this. The applause is tepid as everyone's taking their sheepish bows, and then it's time for the orchestra to take its bow. I take out my handkerchief and tie it to the tip of my baton, and waving the white flag from the pit back and forth. And then all of a sudden, I get a standing ovation, and it's just like, wow, and you get paid to do this? I'm in. After my undergraduate degree, came back to live in Cleveland. I poured coffee for several years, and while taking conducting lessons at Cleveland Institute of Music with Carl Toplow. Spent summers at the Aspen Music Festival, where I studied there, and I needed to get some sort of hands-on conducting experience, which is very, very difficult for people starting out in conducting to be able to have an ensemble that you can work with. I started by getting a substitute teaching certificate through the public schools, and was able to, and would be getting calls like all the time, because school music teachers don't get sick because they have so much they have to achieve. And so all of a sudden these teachers found out that they could get someone who could actually work with the kids. So I was getting calls all the time, and it was a fantastic conducting experience. You never knew what you were going to get. It could be like a flute choir, or it could be like a little brass ensemble, it could be a full band or an orchestra, whatever. It could be elementary school students or high school students. And for a young conductor myself, it was really great to be able to work with different groups and different styles to see how far I can take them. and also to make a whole lot of mistakes. And I made a ton of mistakes. You jump into a situation and try to solve a musical problem one way, and it would just crash and burn. And so you'd remember, okay, don't do that. So next time, let's try something different. So you're in the same situation and try a different technique and a different way to explain it, and then it would work. And so, we're going to remember that one. So it was years, a couple of years of working through the public schools. At the same time, I was conducting church choirs. I had a couple of different church choirs, which kind of teaches you the most important thing in conducting: diplomacy. We had, my very first church choir there in Maple Heights. It was like 6 old ladies and a prima donna. How do you find different ways to be able to say, less vibrato, please? But that experience was really awesome, being able to just work physically with people, and whatever comes to you, your job is to just make them better. And after several years of kind of doing a lot of things on the fly, I got a position with the Northern Ohio Youth Orchestra in Oberlin, a fantastic little youth orchestra made up of kids from all over Lorain County and western Cuyahoga County in northern Ohio. And it was a fine little youth orchestra. And I got a second youth orchestra the following year, the Akron Youth Symphony, and was working with them for a couple of years. And that was a really big youth orchestra. I mean, it was maybe about 90 kids or so in that one. And then the following year, I got the Mansfield Youth Symphony. I had the youth orchestra scene of Northern Ohio all wrapped up. And it was actually enough that I could keep body and soul together. I was like actually making a proper living. But it was really great to work with youth orchestras because it's the first time that any of these kids are playing any of these pieces. And you really have got to roll up your sleeves and get into the under the hood to fix things and to get things working. You really have to overlearn your scores to be able to communicate clearly to this youth orchestra about how this whole piece of music is supposed to work. It was a fantastic experience. And after several years of working with youth orchestras, I knew that I had the skills to move forward. And so I traded them all in and went to the University of Southern California in Los Angeles to study with the great Daniel Lewis, fantastic conducting teacher at the School of Music there at University of Southern California. And being in Los Angeles for a couple of years, getting my master's degree, listening to the LA Phil and all the music making that's going on in Los Angeles, commercial and classical, was a fantastic experience. So after I finished my graduate degree from USC, I spent a year actually making applications just to find a gig, and it was tough. I wrote well over 100 letters in a year, applying for positions all over, from youth orchestras, university, colleges, assistant conductor positions. I got one reply, one. And that was from the Blair School of Music at Vanderbilt University. And took the audition, got the gig, and worked for a couple of years at Vandy at the Blair School of Music, and with a lovely little music program. And then went from there to become the assistant conductor of the Savannah Symphony Orchestra in Savannah, Georgia. And this is the Savannah Symphony, which is different from the orchestra that's there now. It was really a fantastic regional orchestra with a really great reputation nationally. And just worked there for 2 years before I got the call to come to Cincinnati. The executive director of the Savannah Symphony Orchestra was a fellow named Greg Gustafson, who had come to the Savannah Symphony Orchestra from Cincinnati, where he was the manager of the Cincinnati Pops. And so when I got to Savannah, Greg and I became very good friends, and he was going to start this new pop series with the Savannah Symphony Orchestra, because he had all these great ideas from Cincinnati, obviously. He'd been working very closely with Eric Kunzel, and he saw in me someone who could really deliver the goods there in Savannah. So So for 2 years, we'd kind of program things together, and he'd kind of give me an idea of what sort of performers we could use and how we could bring in the community and all sorts of ideas and support. And so, kind of developed this nice little pops program there for the Savannah Symphony Orchestra. Well, at that point in time, the assistant conductor of the Cincinnati Symphony and the Pops was a fellow named Keith Lockhart. And Keith had just gotten the gig as a conductor of the Boston Pops, and his career just completely took off. He left Cincinnati as the associate conductor and went off to Boston. And the next thing you know, Greg Gustafson, calls me into his office and said, John, have you ever thought about becoming the associate conductor of the Cincinnati Symphony and Pops? People go places. So I made the application, took the audition, and got the position working with both Cincinnati Symphony and also Cincinnati Pops. The Cincinnati Symphony and especially Cincinnati Pops were very, very well known to me. When I was conducting the Northern Ohio Youth Orchestra there in Oberlin, it was right there in the early mid-1980s, and that was when the digital revolution in recording was just like taken off. And the Cincinnati Pops was right at the tip of the spear of the digital revolution. I mean, they made so many recordings. And so I had my CD player, and I had my whole stereo set up. And man, it was like one of the only orchestras that you could get so much repertoire because Eric was just recording so much stuff. And so the first digital CD I ever bought was the 1812 Overture with the Cincinnati Pops Orchestra with the digital cannons, and it had this little warning in the lower right-hand corner. It said, a warning, digital cannons, may damage your audio equipment if the volume is too loud. So, of course, it's just like, great, I'm putting this at 11. Let's listen to this thing. And, of course, you're listening to this in digital splendor. We're so used to digital sound now, but when it first came out, it was just like, you're gobsmacked because it's just so brilliant. And so, there we are, and that first digital cannon, and then all of a sudden, my stereo speakers, and it was it. So, thank you, Eric Kunzel, for busting my first pair of speakers. There are actually two stories for the beginning of the Cincinnati Pops. Most recently, it was Eric Kunzel, who was a long-time assistant and associate conductor, worked with Max Rudolph during some of the just glory days as the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. There was a series of concerts given on Sunday nights called the 8 o'clock series. And the 8 o'clock series, which was an earlier concert, believe it or not, all the other concerts were always at 8:30, but this was 8 o'clock, so it was an early concert there on Sundays. And it would always be, the 8 o'clock series was usually popular classics, orchestral music of the classical tradition that would be put together as something for everyone. Eric started inviting folks like Ella Fitzgerald and Duke Ellington and Dave Brubeck, some great jazz artists, and creating orchestral pieces that they could perform with the Pops, but also pieces that they had created specifically for symphony orchestra. I knew it was a real big deal and a new thing, and so they rebranded the 8 o'clock series into the 8 o'clock Pops. And Eric was leading those concerts for many years, so many of them, making recordings from those concerts as well. And in the mid-1970s, they started coming up with the idea, hey, why don't we brand the orchestra as a Pops orchestra, especially because, the digital revolution is taking off. The orchestra is doing a lot more recording, and so they wanted to have its own signature name. So Cincinnati Symphony, Cincinnati Pops, the exact same orchestra. But the style of music, of course, is very much different. So Eric started by recording a lot of the popular classics and then started bringing in more diverse artists and more diverse musical styles. And so in 1977, the Pops was officially branded as the Pops. And in And they've been kind of going ever since. We donned our red jackets and have taken over the world. You know, there was a point in time that the Pops was the biggest selling musical artist in Taiwan, more than even Michael Jackson there in the early 1990s. And with all the recordings that the Pops made, it gave Cincinnati this reputation that went worldwide and became extraordinarily popular. You know, there are times I remember in Germany, you know, you'd say that you're from Cincinnati, and no one would talk about the Bengals or the Reds. You know, the first thing you say, oh, you're from Cincinnati. Oh, the Cincinnati Pops, #1. It's pretty remarkable when you see the power of music to bring people together, and our orchestra does that.
Now
the second story, the second pop story is actually the beginning of our orchestra, of the Cincinnati Symphony. As we all know, as all of us Cincinnatians know, there was a huge influx of German immigrants here in the 1840s, 1850s, and many of those people brought musical traditions. They brought their instruments and their ensembles, singing traditions, of course, as well as orchestral ensembles, as well as the culture of hanging out in beer gardens on Sunday afternoons and listening to some music and drinking beer and enjoying life. And one of those ensembles was called Michael Brand's Grand Orchestra. And Michael Brand's Grand Orchestra was founded in the 1870s, just like right after the Civil War, when Cincinnati was absolutely booming and just beer gardens everywhere. And they're at Henry Wheelert's Tavern. What is it? It's just like right on, is it Vine Street or Race? Vine Street.
It's on Vine.
It's on Vine Street. It's still there, right? And in Wheeler's Tavern, there was this huge beer garden in back. And in fact, there's an etching of Michael Brandon's Grand Orchestra playing a concert while people are drinking beer and socializing and having a good old time. Well, when Theodore Thomas was invited to come to create the May Festival, he needed to have a symphony orchestra. He brought a bunch of ringers from New York City, but he needed players to fill out. And so he was sipping beer there at Wheeler's Tavern, heard this fantastic orchestra and said, oh, I think we have our band. And so all of those players were invited to create the May Festival Orchestra for the very, very first May Festivals. And then after several years of May Festivals, it was the all-woman board decided to come together to create the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. And they needed to have that core of musicians, and they used the orchestra of Michael Brand. Was the orchestra that created the Cincinnati Symphony. So we could say there's Michael Brand who's creating these Pops concerts in the beer gardens, and that is the orchestra that is the founding orchestra that became the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. And even as the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra playing concerts, they started out in Pike's Opera House, but played several venues before coming to permanently to Music Hall. But when they were in Music Hall, Michael Brand would still conduct Pops concerts on Sunday with the members of the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra, which was basically his orchestra as well. So we can say that the idea of the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra was founded by a Pops orchestra. But we have to remember about the word Pops. It's a very important word. When we say Pops nowadays, everyone thinks, oh, okay, soda pop, popcorn, popsicles, lollipops, things that are kind of sweet and bad for you. But the fact is that Pops in music comes from the word popolo, the Latin word that means people. And I think this is what makes our Cincinnati Symphony and the orchestral music scene in Cincinnati unique. It's because it's always been about the people. It's the people's music. And even through our symphony concerts, this is a homegrown orchestra. These are all our own players who've passed down these traditions one generation after the next. And in terms of the popular music, it's like, well, yeah, we're going to play the great classics, but we're also going to be performing music of the now, things that are relevant to us, like right now where we are. And that has been always so important to what defines our orchestral experience in Cincinnati. So when the Pops was founded in the mid-1970s, it was the birth of the Big Red Machine, the great players of Cincinnati Reds who won so many championships during that period of 5-6 years. And Louise Nippert, who was she and Louis Nippert owned the Reds at that point in time. They were also big symphony and big pop supporters, very, very good friends with Eric Kunzel. And it was Louise and Eric who got together and said, well, we want to create a distinctive look for the Pops. And because the Big Red Machine was such a big deal at that point in time, they said, hey, why don't we make the jackets red? And it stuck. So when I came to Cincinnati in 1995, 1 year as assistant, and then the following year was promoted to associate, and worked there in that regard until 2006. And it was a time when there was one assistant conductor. That was it. Now we carry two. But I would basically cover every concert of both the symphony and the Pops. Covering means that you're learning all the scores, so at some point in time, if the conductor gets sick or is ill or wants to go out to the hall to listen to what the orchestra sounds like, you are ready, like in a split second, to jump up there and take over. And so this is what assistant and associate conductors do. So the thing is that you have to learn a massive amount of repertoire, and not only all the symphonic repertoire, but then also all the Pops repertoire as well. And then on top of that, I designed and conducted all of the education concerts. And so we would do a whole series of education concerts both in the spring and in the fall every year, and designing those concerts so that they would link together with the curriculum standards of the states of Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana at the same time. So those were actually a whole lot of fun to put together, to create concert themes that related to what was going on in the classroom, but also would use music to kind of teach a whole nother level of appreciation. For instance, one of the ones I was most proud of was a concert that we would do for fourth graders, because in fourth grade was always the unit on water. So we had a whole concert about water. And so we had Nuage of Debussy, which is water in the vapor form. We'd have the Storm Scene from Beethoven 6, which is water in the liquid form. And then we'd perform Winter from the Four Seasons by Vivaldi, which would be water in its solid form as ice. And then we played Giggling Rapids of Duke Ellington and the Moldau of Smetana, La Mer of Debussy, which are bodies of water, rivers or lakes or the ocean itself. And then how we celebrated water, everything from Respighi's Fountains of Rome to the water music of George Frederick Handel. And actually, in creating these young people's concerts, these education concerts, was a lot about kind of similar to Pops programming, telling stories through music, but lots of different varieties of music, not really, strictly classical or strictly Pops. You can mix it all up and tell fantastic stories. Also performed all of the family concerts with Cincinnati Symphony. And so as associate conductor here for 11 years, I was working my tail off, and it was an extraordinary time to be able to create a lot of programs and develop a lot of beautiful relationships with the orchestra. Got the gig as conductor of the Windsor Symphony Orchestra in Windsor, Ontario, just right across from Detroit, in 2001. So there was a period of time that I was conducting both as assistant conductor of Cincinnati, and then also music director of the Windsor Symphony Orchestra. Windsor Symphony Orchestra, a very small orchestra, maybe a budget of a couple $1 million as opposed to the Cincinnati Symphony and Pops, which was at that time probably $40 million budget. But the cool thing about having even a smaller orchestra is that I could call all the shots and take all of these ideas that I had been developing and working with all the people in Cincinnati with this fantastic orchestra, and see if I could work them out on a much smaller scale. So finally, I'm in charge of creating all the programming for everything. So from the classical programs, for the full symphony programs, to the chamber orchestra, chamber music, family concerts, young people's concerts, and putting it all together in a package that relates very, very closely to the city that we're living in. Windsor, Ontario is a very, very diverse city. I think it's the second or third most diverse city in Canada. And so I felt that was a real touchstone. There's a very old French tradition there, French-Canadian tradition that was still there, plus people from all over the world who were living there. One of the great things about Windsor is you can walk down the street and you can hear people speaking like a half dozen different languages, just like walking down the street. It's incredible. So what I found was that just like, man, if we could create concerts and programs that can integrate musical and artistic styles, dance, choral singing, instrumental music, from all of these parts of the world, we could create a symphony orchestra that kind of expresses the ethos of the city itself. And so for every concert that we presented, there was some angle that pulled local people in there, and it was a fantastic success. And so very much after conducting in Windsor for 10 years, I got the call to come back here to Cincinnati to lead the Pops, and came back with a different perspective on how the orchestra can relate to the community. How can we be a voice for the musical history and the music making that is happening here and now? And that's been the great joys of working with the Cincinnati Pops for the last decade and a half is creating those connections for the local community. An orchestra is there to bring great music that can only be performed by such a large and nuanced ensemble. So it's to present great masterworks, certainly, but great music that has been written for this ensemble. But it's also there to reflect the music of the community in which it serves, to be able to pull together other performers and music makers within that community and raise them up to another level. It's a catalyst for great music making, but beyond that, it's also it is there to raise us all up, to bring us together, and to inspire us all to do great things. You know, they say you can't go home. And when we left Cincinnati to move to Canada to take on the Windsor Symphony Orchestra, we really didn't look back. We were just moving forward to the next gig, and it's really kind of remarkable that only a few years later, after moving away, that I had the opportunity and was invited back. And to come back home after spending a decade here and then being away and then coming back again, you get to see the whole community with new eyes. And of course, I had this incredible advantage of being here for a decade and taking a lot of mental notes and a lot of pages from the Eric Kunzel playbook that had kind of become my pages as well. but to kind of look at Cincinnati through a whole different lens and from a new vantage point of being able to lead this remarkable orchestra. And so I really wanted to look deeply into the musical legacy that defines Cincinnati and to figure out a way that we could get our orchestra to celebrate all of those types of musical traditions. A lot of people say, why the Cincinnati Pops? Why Cincinnati for this, remarkable Pops institution? And it really comes from our history. It's the Ohio River. When this city was first founded, by waves of settlers, pioneers who were settling in this area. They were taking their flatboats and such from the Appalachians and bringing with them Celtic music traditions, mountain music. And as those flatboats then turn into riverboats that were bringing coal to stoke the flames of the Industrial Revolution, that attracted people from all over the world, including all German immigrants who came here in so many waves, who brought their musical traditions from Europe. And that settled right here into the Ohio Valley and kind of mixed with some of those Celtic traditions. And of course, you had the music of Black America with those same riverboats that were delivering these commercial goods all the way down to New Orleans and bringing up African folk music traditions, jazz and blues. And the river itself, which is a gateway to freedom for thousands and thousands of freedom seekers making their way to Canada, bringing the music of gospel and the spiritual, the music of hope. All of these musical styles were settling here in the Ohio Valley. It could have happened no other place. And you have someone like Stephen Foster, who was working at his brother's shipping company in the 1830s and 40s, and is listening to all of this music around him and starts to write the very first pages of the American Songbook. And then you have someone like Sid Nathan, who a couple of generations later, founds King Records. It's the first time, he invited black and white musicians to sit in the same room, and rockabilly and rock and roll was born. And then you start to include the music of the spiritual and blues and R&B and jazz. And all of those musical forms that are creating here, bluegrass, are being recorded there at King Records and coalescing into this whole new musical style called funk. I mean, so much of American music making was happening right here because this is where people came together. And the Pops, as an orchestra, we express all of those American musical styles that are as relevant to us here as they are around the world. It's our musical voice. And so we celebrate those through our concerts and through our arrangements and through everything that we do. We tell those American musical stories. So one of the reasons we created the American Originals Project was to help tell these stories. And the very, very first one was based a lot on the music of Stephen Foster, but a lot of other composers around that era of the mid-19th century. And as Joe Henry, who performed on concerts and later recording, he once said, some of these songs that we're doing are as common as having salt on your table. These are songs that we all know, but most people don't know where they came from. And there were composers out there, making decisions about what lyrics they're going to use and what tunes they're going to use. And it's kind of become part of all of us. And so we wanted to find a way that we could take some of those great old tunes and arrange them and arrange them in a way that contemporizes them and celebrates this great musical legacy, so much of which started right here. So we wanted to invite some local people, including Over the Rhine, Karen and Linford, who are fantastic friends and did some beautiful work on that. Aoife O'Donovan as well joined us on that one. Roseanne Cash joined us, and that was a real trip to be able to work with Roseanne, and of course Joe Henry, and Rob Mounsey, who created spectacular arrangements for the project. And it was a way to present this as a concert, but also as a way to record this so that we would be able to pass that legacy on. And then from our first American Originals, we decided our next one, we wanted to tell a little story about music that spawned in this region and around the country after the First World War. Our project, our concert recording was happening like right at the 100th anniversary of the end of the First World War. And we thought, well, did we want to, have some project of, to have music of all sorts of, patriotic, Johnny, get your gun type stuff. And we thought, well, look, why don't we try to think of this as in a different way? Because after the First World War, the jazz age just exploded. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that during the First World War was the first time that huge quantities of African Americans joined the army and were taking up arms to fight for liberty in Europe. And so many of those African American units had their own bands. And those bands were not playing John Philip Sousa marches. They were playing ragtime, and they were playing music of African American composers. And Europe had never heard any of this music before. This is before the recorded age. And people in Europe completely flipped when they heard the music of the Harlem Hellfighters Band, the 369th Regiment, playing ragtime and marches. And it was said that all of France had contracted ragtimeitis thanks to the music of James Reese Europe and his 369th Harlem Hellfighters. And so after the First World War, many of those players came home with this feeling of that this was not just their own music, this was music to be shared with the world. And started performing in Broadway shows and in clubs and in jazz clubs, and the players who were playing in all of these regimental bands in after the First World War started developing their own bands, and the jazz age was born. And so we wanted to capture that feeling of the contributions, especially of those early African American musical pioneers who kind of created the jazz sound. And so we had a host of wonderful artists, including Rhiannon Giddens, Pokey Lafarge joined us for that one as well, and the Steep Canyon Rangers to kind of to reimagine this music that kind of created the sound of the American 20th century. And that second American Originals was nominated for a Grammy.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? That must have felt pretty good when that happened.
Yeah, I was. We've pretty much been working to try to have one big recording project every year. So American Originals 1918, I think that came out in 1919. In 1919, we recorded Voyage, which was a kind of a space-themed concert, and that was released like a year later. And what happened was that we actually had two recording projects that were in the same class to be for the Grammys, to be considered for the Grammys. And we kind of thought that our CD Voyage was going to be the one that might get something, because it was a really big orchestra, a lot of really big, splendid arrangements. And so it kind of came as a surprise that the American Originals 1918 was the one that got the Grammy nod. But it was very, very exciting to be able to go and become part of the whole process of going to Los Angeles and representing the city of Cincinnati and our fantastic musicians of the Cincinnati Pops. And the coolest thing about being at the Grammys, I think, is that you're with all of these people from all types of genres, right? You're in the elevator, and there's a guy with dreadlocks down to his knees, and there's someone else, dressed in leather with all sorts of tattoos and piercings on, and someone else with a cowboy hat and rhinestones, and you start talking about music, and everyone is so respectful and engaged and excited about what everyone else is doing, and that was really, really cool to see that we are all brothers and sisters in music, and that musical style is and diversity are things to be celebrated, and really makes music like so very expressive, because there's so many different ways that you can do it, and to know that everyone was so chill and wonderful about embracing all the musical styles while we were there. The recorded legacy of the orchestra is long. I mean, some of the very, very first recordings ever made of symphony orchestras were done by the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. The very first radio broadcast of a symphony orchestra was by the CSO. So the recording legacy has been going on since the beginning of recorded music. It was there during the 1970s that when the Pops became a branded ensemble as the Cincinnati Pops, a deal was struck with this new company out of Cleveland called Telarc. And Telarc was like at the cutting edge of the digital age. And so all of those recordings, including the 1812 recording that I busted my first stereo set with, they were all made by Telarc. And I mean, hundreds and hundreds of recordings between the Pops and the Symphony. And we kind of built Telarc and the digital revolution around the world. Telarc was sold to Concord Records in 2005, and they took the whole catalog, but they cut out their recording portion of it. And so we no longer had a relationship with Telarc, and so we decided that we were going to start our own record label, and we call it Fanfare, because the Fanfare for the Common Man by Aaron Copland was first performed, it was commissioned and performed by the Cincinnati Symphony during Second World War. And the Fanfare for the Common Man, of course, one of the greatest works of American music. So we named our label after Fanfare. And the very first Fanfare recording was our Home for the Holidays with the Cincinnati Pops, my very first recording with the Pops. And since we've made more than a dozen recordings and continue our recording tradition with the Cincinnati Symphony and the Cincinnati Pops. Creating a Pops program, let alone creating a Pops recording, takes a mountain of work. I cannot tell you. Let's say the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra, we're going to record Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. It's just like, great. Beethoven wrote the symphony, 200 some odd years ago, and all we do is we just pass out the parts and we rehearse them and play it, and off we go. But for the Pops, we have to create all of our arrangements, all of our music, pretty much from scratch, everything for so many of our concerts. So for a project like American Originals, we had to first develop what storyline we're going to tell throughout the concert. So we want to know what specific pieces we're going to perform. We want to do some Stephen Foster, but we also want to do some other composers and some other songs from the era that we think are particularly compelling. Then we have to talk to our audience, and we have to talk to our artists to see what pieces they might be interested in singing. It might be that Roseanne Cash really wanted to sing Old Kentucky Home. We're going to include that one in it. And so you kind of get all of those ideas. And then, of course, marketing, they've got to get in there. And they have a few things. They want to make sure they've got a few names that they can sprinkle on there to make sure that people kind of know what the whole project's about. So all of that planning is a year to a year and a half out. And then once we kind of determine, what the parameters of the concert are and what the repertoire are, maybe about 9 months beforehand, we start to assign arrangers. So there are certain arrangers who are better at certain things. Rob Mounsey is fantastic at creating a very subtle and beautiful vocal textures and great, beautiful orchestration, and he has a real good sense of unique orchestral grooves. We have someone like Timmy Behrens who's kind of great in creating that traditional Cincinnati pop sound for a march or other big symphonic works. So we start to assign arrangers to certain pieces. And it takes them sometimes, a couple of months to be able to create a really great sound for the orchestra. I'll get scores back and forth to look at them and say, oh no, maybe we don't want trombones there, maybe we want bassoons, or maybe we want to lengthen this little solo section. We've got a really great fiddle solo player, so maybe we want to expand that a little bit more. Maybe we need to add conga here, or triangle there. And so there's a little bit of back and forth that goes until we finally get everything together. And usually when we get everything together, it's about a month before the show. And so then the music gets distributed to all the the musicians get the music that gets distributed to everyone a couple weeks before the show. And then we'll have rehearsals we'll have anywhere between 2, 3, 4 rehearsals for a concert, like leading right up to the concert. And then would have 3 concerts, and each of those concerts is recorded. And then we take all of the recordings from all of 3 of those concerts, and we start comparing, which one was a better take, et cetera, and then it's kind of mix and match to create the whole CD. Whew, that's a lot of work. Here at the Pops, we perform with a lot of A-list singers, artists of all kinds. And especially when they come to music hall, one of the things I always love to do is, kind of we come in through the back door and you're kind of going through the backstage area, which is all cinder block. I mean, it kind of looks like a junior high school or something. And very utilitarian. And you walk through all of the backstage area, and then you walk in through this little door that takes you out onto stage. And of course, you walk onto stage and you see the chandelier and the plasterwork and the ceiling, and you can just hear them. Everyone always takes that huge big breath. I always like to be there for that. And so, although many of us, well, all of us, are so worshipful of so many of these extraordinary artists who we invite to Cincinnati, what sometimes we don't realize is that some of the artists are like completely flipped out when they have to sing with a symphony orchestra of 90 of the finest musicians on the planet who are all there together. And so it was Roseanne Cash who was like completely freaking out because she was having to sing with like a professional symphony orchestra, and she was. I had to tell her, just relax, just do your thing. We're all going to have fun, and it was funny to see for that show in particular. It was Over the Rhine and along with Roseanne and a couple of other performers who were kind of all huddled in there, kind of confessing about how terrified they were of the whole process. Anyway, it all worked out swell in the end. It's kind of been extraordinary through my career to have lived through so many changes in recorded media. Unbelievable. I mean, I grew up as a kid with LPs and, being like the top of the sonic landscape. And then it was when I was just fresh out of college, all of a sudden, compact discs became the thing, and everyone's ditching their LPs for compact discs, and then it just only a decade and a half, 2 decades later, all of a sudden CDs aren't being played, and everyone's just streaming online, and then even streaming online has kind of gone away for the idea of having reels and music videos that you can get on your iPhone. And so we determined at the Pops that we wanted to find a way that we could bring the orchestral experience to people in a visceral way, not only the sound, but also kind of seeing the stage and to seeing what's going on and the visual aspect. And so we created a series with CET called American Soundscapes, and we wanted to, very similar to American Originals, be able to tell some of the musical stories of America through these live performance videos taken from all sorts of concerts. So it can be everything from the music of Hollywood to bluegrass, to rock and roll, to holiday music of all kinds, to R&B, soul. And the whole series, I think, expresses the extraordinary variety, the panoply of musical style that we have here in the United States that is unique, and that our orchestra, I believe, expresses probably better than any. Unequivocally, it's got to be Classical Roots. Classical Roots is an annual program that we started in 2001 to celebrate the African American orchestral musical experience and to celebrate Black joy. The program was started in 2001 in response to the civic unrest that Cincinnati was wrestling with during the spring and summer of 2001. And we wanted to find a way that the orchestra could help to become part of the solution to bring our community together through music. And we had to get out of our comfort zone in music hall. So we developed a concert series that would go to Black churches throughout the community with a musical program that would celebrate the African American musical experience. Our very first concert was at Lincoln Heights Missionary Baptist Church, and the featured work was the Dvorak Symphony No. 9 from the New World. And Dvorak was very, very much influenced by the music of ragtime and the music of the spiritual in creating this symphonic work. And of course, this symphonic work went on to create connections with the Black community in spinning out musical traditions that continued through the 20th century. And from that first concert at Lincoln Heights Missionary Baptist Church, there was such an outpouring of joy and love from the audiences there that this program kept on going and kept on building and continues to this day. So throughout my experience as associate conductor of the orchestra, I would conduct these annually in many of the Black churches around town. When I left to go to Canada, those concerts continued. And when I came back, Classical Roots had grown to the point that we had to take those concerts and perform them in music hall, where they've been sold out ever since. And of course, in music hall, we also have created the Classical Roots Community Gospel Choir that is presented for all of our concerts, a chorus made up of singers from 50 different churches from all over the region that come together specifically to perform with us on these concerts. We've had fantastic artists. Common, it was the very first time he'd ever performed with a symphony orchestra. Cynthia Erivo, and so many more. They've been absolutely splendid and so excited to be able to work with so many artists, but also to develop the orchestral repertoire written by Black composers for symphony orchestra that had been largely ignored by the orchestra for so many years that we were able to bring back to life. And the way that this concert has brought together the African American community through music and through this great celebration has been an absolute joy to behold. People always ask, what's the difference between a symphony orchestra and a Pops orchestra? Well, in Cincinnati, they're the exact same thing. All of our players at Cincinnati Symphony are all the players of the Cincinnati Pops. That the term Pops orchestra really refers to our repertoire, the music that we're playing. And for the Cincinnati Pops, it's all about expressing the American musical ethos, but clothed in a symphonic orchestra sound. So it can be anything from Broadway to R&B, soul, funk, jazz, gospel, country, bluegrass. I mean, literally, we play it all. But to perform so many American musical styles specifically, you need to have what's called a rhythm section. It's kind of the heartbeat of just about any type of American musical ensemble. You've got drum kit, piano, guitar, and bass. You play in a rock band, you've got those players in there. They're always there. You play in a gospel, you're playing in a Broadway pit, whatever. You're country western, you're always going to have those instruments. And so those instruments are the heartbeat of the Cincinnati Pops Orchestra because those instruments are the ones that kind of really propel the whole ensemble. And so as conductor of the Cincinnati Pops, I wanted to be able to celebrate that rhythm section and their ability to play all sorts of music. I mean, they're the ones who really drive it. And we've got a spectacular rhythm section with the Cincinnati Pops. Julie Spangler on piano, Mark Wolfley on kit, Matt Zori on double bass, Roger Klug on guitar. They're spectacular musicians and are gigging all over town, and we're very blessed to be able to have them to really drive our Cincinnati Pops Orchestra. So we've created their own branding, their own name, and we call them the Poptet. And sometimes they might be a quartet, sometimes they might be a trio, sometimes we might add some other players, like Paul Patterson might play fiddle, or you might get a sax player, Rick Van Mater might join us, or someone else, or a singer. And so it can vary anything, but from 3 players to 5, 6, to a sextet, to a septet. So we just call them the Poptet, and they're able to play in all sorts of places where the Pops just can't go. So, for example, they're playing right here at the library. They're for a concert on the stairs, kind of telling a little musical story of the history of music in Cincinnati. But they can play at schools, they can play at clubs, they can perform in all sorts of ways to get the word out, and also to help tell the stories of our own Cincinnati Pops Orchestra. Everything excites me about the music in this town. It really is. I think you really do have to go away and come back to realize how special it is, right? You can go to the Comet Club in Northside and listen to the Comet Bluegrass All-Stars. These guys are spectacular, right? The Cafe Vivace, an incredible jazz club here. But there are lots of other jazz clubs going here as well. There's lots of other places, lots of other venues all over to hear bluegrass, or R&B, or soul, or funk. I mean, there's so many different clubs and music venues around that are perpetually playing the music of America right here in our own backyard. Larry Hamby, a great A&R guy, worked for A&M Records, a very good friend, former board member of the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra and Pops. He once said, if don't have a plan B, he said, go all in, because that's going to be the only way that you're going to make it, is if you are all in. Conducting professor Charles Brooke, he once said, if you want your son or daughter to become a conductor, throw every obstacle in their path. And if they can overcome those obstacles, then they have what it takes to make it in the biz. You really have to devote yourself wholeheartedly to it. And there's lots of opportunities, and there are lots of ways to express yourself, but you really have to be all in. And it's not to say that you may end up exactly where you think you're going to end up, because there may be other paths that your passion will take you, and things that you discover where there's something that is extraordinary that you may not want to pass up, or that your specific skills and passion might be able to actually fulfill in a really important way. I know for myself, I think when I was a kid growing up, I wanted to be a jazz trumpet player. I wanted to be like Herb Alpert or Maynard Ferguson. I wanted to be that guy with a horn. That dream stopped, and different door opened up. In conducting, and I kind of thought, wow, if I could be a conductor, boy, that'd be fantastic. I'd love working with students. Boy, if I could work with youth orchestras and maybe a university, that would be awesome. Kind of got there, and that actually didn't quite work out. So, another door opened up as an assistant conductor in Savannah. And then it brought me here to Cincinnati. And I really never thought of myself as being a Pops conductor. I always loved American music and American musical style. But, I really would have thought when I first came here as associate conductor, I would have thought of myself, my career, giving that the next greatest interpretation of a Brahms symphony. And kind of went off to Canada to see if that would be where I really needed to go. And it really wasn't until Eric Kunzel had passed away and got the call to come back to lead the Pops. I thought, well, maybe this is something where I really need to be. That combines all of my different passions and knowledge and interest, and it absolutely blossomed. So to that young musician, it's like, go for it, go all in. But also keep your eyes open to see what great opportunities are around, because there are lots of them.